Okay, I think everybody's here. Thank you to everyone for joining us. We've got some updates for you here for the H1B cap for this year, and then also some updates for H1Bs in general. So thank you for watching. At the end, we're going to have a QR code as well as our contact details. So if you have questions, you can reach out to us or schedule an appointment to talk to us anytime. So we're going to start with an H1B overview for those of you who don't understand what an H1B is or have questions about the basics. We want to make sure everybody's on the same page to start with. So there's three key elements to any H1B. We have the wage, education, and job. So all of these must satisfy specific criteria that USCIS and the Department of Labor have set. So the wage is a salary that must be at or above the prevailing wage. Prevailing wages are set for geographic area and for occupation. The education, so it has to be for a position that that is a professional position, and your education must align with that position. Specifically, you must have at least a bachelor's degree or the equivalent of a bachelor's degree. For the job, it has to be a professional position. That's one that usually requires a bachelor's degree for its performance, or one that is so complex that people usually associate it with a bachelor's degree. This, however, is not limited to engineering positions or developer positions or any particularly advanced position. It can be any position in any industry that requires a bachelor's degree or one that people usually associate it with requiring a bachelor's degree. Next slide, please. We have four types of an H1B. For the purposes of this call, we're just going to talk about the normal cap subject first time H1B. But there are three other types we wanted you to know about. There's the H1B one. This is for citizens of Chile and Singapore. There is a cap on these, but the cap has never been reached. So if you happen to be a foreign national that from either Chile or Singapore, you're exempt from the H1B cap. Then you have concurrent H1Bs. This is for individuals with second jobs. So this is also an exempt H1B, but you do have to have an H1B to begin with. And if you do, you can file for multiple employers or multiple jobs. So far, we've never tested the fact of having two full-time jobs. In theory, that's possible, but likely to face more scrutiny. The last one is a cap-exempt H1B. So this is an H1B that is not subject to the H1B lottery. For this type of H1B, you have to be a university or a nonprofit research organization. If you're one of those two, then you can file an H1B at any time. I'll get to this later, but there are some solutions to be found here for individuals who want to work in the private sector, but didn't get picked in the lottery, where you can do a combination of a cap-exempt H1B for the right organization and private employment, and do that concurrently. Basics of an H1B. Applications require that we file an application with USCIS and with the Department of Labor. You have to have a sponsoring employer. This is true even for the self-employment H1Bs, which are brand new this year. Still a lot of details to be sorted out, but you still have to have an incorporated company who can petition for you. You have to have a job offer. The H1B approval periods are for 2 3-year increments for a total of 6 years in total. There are exemptions, and we won't discuss them here, for a time period beyond the 6-year limit. But generally speaking, without those exemptions, you have a strict limit of 6 years that is approved in 2 increments. That is not true, though, for the new self-employed H1B. The increments are 1.5 years there, but the total is still the same, 6 years. The position for any H1B is required to be a specialty occupation position. The H1B lottery, so quick overview here, is that there are 65,000 H1B visas available every single year. These are brand new numbers, and they're available to anyone. There is an additional 20,000 that is reserved for U.S. master's degree holders or individuals with a U.S. degree that's higher than a master's. these numbers are added together. So the 20,000 lottery is conducted first. Any non-selected cases are then rolled into the lottery for the 65,000 visas that are available. We see a random computer-generated lottery any time that the H-1B cap exceeds the available numbers. So that has been the case every year since 2014. And so it's pretty much anticipated in the industry and by USCIS. It's just a given. We're going to see a random lottery. The lottery itself is run via a pre-registration system. Kind of the purpose of this call is to turn everybody's thoughts toward this registration system, because that system's going to open this year on March 7th at noon Eastern time, and that's going to close at noon on the 24th Eastern time. You'll notice every single year that there are more, USCIS runs the lottery for more than just 85,000 visas. That's a good thing for most of us, but the reason for that isn't because there's more numbers than that available every year. There's only 85,000 numbers available. But USCIS can add numbers back from previous H-1B lottery selections that were not used or not filed. So, for example, last year they ran 2 lotteries. If they still didn't have numbers to fill their total available slots, those numbers are added back to the lottery for the next fiscal year. So, for example, last year in the first lottery, USCIS selected 214,000 cases. So that means that they approximately had about 30,000 visas from H-1Bs that were not used and that were approved and not used, or lottery slots from last year that were not filled. That resulted in 223 registrants being in 220,000, 120,000 registrants selected in the initial system. They ran a second lottery. We had 13,000 individuals. So those are the numbers that we ran into last year. This year, we expect the chances to roughly be about 1 in 4, 1 in 5 of being selected. If you're in the master's cap, your chances are much higher. Next slide, please. So the H-1B pre-registration dates. So this is our system that we've, So this is the dates that's been released on this. So, and some of what we expect based on previous years. So first, USCIS is going to open the registration system on March 7th at noon Eastern time. They're going to close this on March 24th at noon Eastern time. This window is about a week shorter than what we've seen in any previous year. So that's very important. You have less time than we usually do. We expect that USCIS will run and the lottery between the 24th and the 31st, and will publish the results by the 31st. We'll then begin the process of notifying employers of selected cases and indicating what the next steps are to get those cases filed. The petitions need to be filed between we'll likely have a filing window of April 1st until June 30th. Practically speaking, that means that you must initiate any selected cases no later than June 15th. Any later than June 15th and you will not get it selected. Not selected. You won't get it in time for them to approve it. There are a lot of preliminary steps and you have to have enough time to get the case prepared. Next slide, please. So the H-1B lottery process, what do we need from you? So the required documents here are, we need your passport, we need your resume, and then we need all degrees and your transcripts. These need to be sent to us no later than March 1st so that we can get your case into the lottery. We'll be accepting registrations all the way up through the end of the filing window, but as that gets later, your costs are higher with us because we have to rush it, and we also can't guarantee that we'll get this in time for you. For selected cases, what are our supporting documents? So this varies based off case and occupation and industry a little bit, but generally speaking, you need a specific work location. That's a specific street address. You need a thorough job description. one or two job duties doesn't work. You need a very thorough job description. You need an offer letter and an employment agreement that matches the details for the H-1B petition. And ideally, also, if you're currently working for that employer, match what you're doing at that time. Then we need documentation to show that work is available to you. This varies significantly by industry. So we'll help guide you through that process to determine what you need for a smooth H-1B approval. If you're in the United States, we also need evidence that you've maintained your status. Next slide, please. We've got some common issues for selected status or selected cases that we wanted to hit real quick because these issues are very, very important and they're still not talked about very much in the immigration community. F1 students are facing a lot of scrutiny for maintenance of status. Now, for some individuals, let's just take an F1 student completing a bachelor's degree here in the United States. If that's in a STEM field, that roughly means that they're going to have 7 years in the United States on F1 status. And you may need to demonstrate maintenance of status for that 7-year window all the way until you receive a green card. So documentation is very important. It's also critical to understand that they're always looking at this F1 to see if you maintained your status. Some hot points here are the periods while you're attending classes. Any periods of CPT employment, that's usually while you're completing your degree. Any periods of OPT and OPT STEM employment. Some key things about this are that OPT can be unpaid, but you still have to be doing productive work. On the other hand, OPT STEM, that must be paid. Doesn't have to be at a prevailing wage or any specific amount, but it must be paid. For OPT, you can only have 90 days of unemployment. If you have 91 or 92 or 93, USCIS has gotten very, very strict on this, and you won't be able to get the change of status. In conglomerate between OPT and OPT STEM, you can have 150 days of unemployment. The key element of both OPT and OPT STEM, though, is actual work. So this is productive status. There's a common misconception, and you even had some bad actors taking advantage of people issuing offer letters if they were paid amount of money. But the misconception is if I've got an offer letter, I'm maintaining my status. That is not true. USCIS is scrutinizing this quite heavily to see, did you actually do productive work? If you find yourself in a situation where you haven't actually been doing productive work, or you're concerned about whether you maybe in your past you paid for an offer letter, contact us. We're happy to explain the options to you and see what solutions we can present. Next slide. Key updates for the fiscal year for 2026. So this is a really, really important one because we have a lot of moving pieces and a lot of changes here. These changes happened pretty rapidly. And they took effect just before the change in administrations that we saw in January. So first, the cost this year. We have a huge increase here, an increase of $205. So our registration fee last year and for the previous years was just $10 per applicant. As of this year, it is now $215 per applicant. Still pretty cheap by comparison to actually filing a selected case. That's less than 10% of your total cost to file an H-1B. But it's also pretty expensive by comparison. This is a big jump. This is applicable to all participants in the process, and it's non-refundable regardless of whether you're picked or not. It covers, according to USCIS, their administrative costs. We have a requirement for new I-129 forms. These were just released on January 17th. Using an outdated form on a cap case can be fatal because you may not have time to fix it and still send it back to the government. They will reject an H-1B if the wrong forms are used. Updated definition to a specialty occupation. So this ensures alignment with USCIS preferences and standards. But for employers, this means that we have to provide evidence that the position requires a degree in a specific field, that the degree that's required is directly related to the job duties. For third-party placements, your end clients have to get involved again at all levels. So they have to provide confirmation at the front end for the filing, and then they've got to confirm the statements directly to USCIS when contacted by USCIS about the position requirements. This is a key aspect that's going to start tripping people up. because failure to have this stuff, this is wide open to get your case denied simply because they don't get the right confirmation from your client. Another key update is that we now have a self-employed H1B. Contact us if you've got questions on this. This is still new, still evolving, and there are a lot of nuanced issues that have to be addressed. But we expect a bigger influx of self-employed lottery petitions, and then individuals, if they're selected, who will put these details together for their own employment on an H1B. Key details, there's 3 of them. You have to have a business plan. You have to have a board of people that supervises the company and supervises you as the business owner. Then there's special incorporating provisions and agreements that need to be taken into account as the company's incorporated. Or if the company already exists, there's special operating agreements that have to be prepared to demonstrate that you've got compliance for a self-employed H1B. The last thing that's not mentioned here is the prevailing wage still has to be paid. For company owners, this is a little bit of a tricky point because you're essentially paying yourself, but it's key for compliance. The other aspect is many company owners are also executives. So if you're working in a role that's an executive or a manager for your own company, then your wages are going to be higher. And then if you're not, well, then the question is, are you getting paid for management or executive work for yourself? So there's a lot of issues here that's going to have to be sorted out. If you've got questions, please reach out or schedule a consult with us so we can talk through the current status and how it fits your case. Other items here that we are seeing both in the landscape and specifically from the new rules that came out on the 17th of January, 2025. We're expecting increased site visits. They've been pretty high already. We expect that to go up even further. We are anticipating it may even replace a lot of requests for evidence. So meaning they will contact the employee, the employer, and the client if there is one, and they'll expect verification from all of them, similar to the evidence that they would ask for in a request for evidence, but it's in a much less formal aspect, but also a more strict time frame for responses. H1B employers have to maintain a location in the United States where they can receive legal service and where documents can be mailed. The new rules require cooperations with inquiries and site visits from both the end client, H1B employees, and the employer. And they've hinted at fines and penalties or outright denials if there is not cooperation. Lastly, for prevailing wages, there are 4 different levels of prevailing wages that are published by the Department of Labor. These 4 wage levels correspond to position complexity and responsibility. Historically, we've not seen much focus on the prevailing wage levels. That's changing kind of rapidly. So you need to ensure that the right wage level is selected for your petition, or you'll be looking at a denial. Some special considerations for F1 students. Again, this is in regard to the cap gap provisions. So number 1, we've got an extension for this. So it has changed from being from April 1st to an automatic extension until September 30th. It's now all the way until April 1st of 2026. But this applies to individuals who apply for an H1B, are selected, file the H1B with a change of status. If you file an H1B and it's not with a change of status, cap gap is not applicable to you. Where this helps individuals is that if you have an EAD, either STEM or straight up OPT EAD, the 12-month OPT card, if that expires between April 1st and September 30th of 2025, you're eligible for this cap gap extension. This cap gap extension is automatic, but you can also request an I-20 from the school that documents this cap gap. If you have any questions, we're happy to provide guidance on this regarding the requirements and the necessary items that you need for cap gap. Every H1B is 2 parts, a H1B and then a status component. Without H1B status, the H1B is no good to any individual. If you're in the United States, you can request a change of status. After it's approved, your S status will automatically change from whatever it is today to the H1B starting on or after October 1st, 2025. When the CAP petition is filed, you must be in the United States and there can't be any international travel while it's pending. A change of status is required, as I mentioned on the previous slide, if you are seeking the CAP gap extension. For individuals who are not here or want to apply for a dormant H1B, we choose something called consular processing or consular notification. In this case, the status activation is not automatic. Activation is required either by completing a stamping process at a U.S. consulate and then entering the U.S. on the H1B, or filing a change of status in the United States. If you need assistance with the stamping process in this, we can do that. But if you're applying for consular notification and you're here, there's no restriction on foreign travel while this petition is pending. Next screen, please. What happens if you're not selected? With a selection rate that's expected of 1 in 4 or 1 in 5, this means that 3 out of 4 or 4 out of 5 people will not be selected. Every case is different. Some of the options that we typically look at are CPT, OPT, an extension of F1 status. Is there other dependent visas or investor visas? Or maybe there's a jump straight to a green card that's possible for you. There's a lot of options. We're happy to discuss that on a case-by-case basis. If 2025 is your last chance to obtain the H1B visa, contact us if you're not selected. We can work out your next steps. Thank you very much for your attention. I appreciate you listening to this presentation. If you have questions, we're not going to take any questions on this call today, but if you have questions, please use our phone number, use our email, or this QR code link will take you to an appointment scheduling page where you can book an appointment with me to get any questions answered that you have. You can also find this scheduling link on our website at www.lukebowmanlaw.com. Thank you all very much. Have a great rest of your day.